Hey, I have a request. Can we stop saying the R word, the derogatory word that refers to people with intellectual disabilities? I'm not going to say it because my purpose really is to ask people to stop saying it, not to give myself an excuse to say it a bunch of times in this video. You know the word I'm talking about. Can we just stop? I should clarify, I am specifically talking to my fellow progressives. People on the right aren't going to stop saying it because I ask them to. In fact, a bunch of them are probably leaving one-word comments on this video right now because their children who think defiantly posting hate speech in the replies when they've been asked not to is an act of courageous cultural rebellion. If you're one of those people, I'm not talking to you. You've more than demonstrated that talking to you about anything is a waste of fucking time. You'd let your own children die of the measles to own the libs. So if you clicked on this video for some reason, go jerk off to another AI trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League sequel instead, and let me talk to the grown-ups. The R word. Really? What are we doing? I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to see people on my side of the political spectrum saying the R word in this year of 2026. For those of you watching this video after discovering it on a server unearthed from the post-apocalyptic rubble, that's 2026 according to the calendar we used before the global climate catastrophe, or the nuclear war, or RFK Jr. bringing back smallpox on purpose, or whatever it was that finally caused human civilization to collapse under the weight of its own hubris. Like and subscribe. The R word is a hurtful and gratuitous word that we should have long since outgrown as a society, and yet I see people using it everywhere online. My own comment sections, threads, Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, especially Twitter, no surprise there. They probably say it on Reddit too, but I don't know that firsthand because there's no reason for me to ever go to fucking Reddit. Reddit is worse than Twitter. There's my hot take for the day. When the word is said by some MAGA type, some shameless bottom-feeding, grievance-farming, outrage machine-grinding, proudly ignorant troll like Elon Musk or the current president of the United States, as ugly and inexcusable as it is, I get it. They're hateful people. They denigrate others on purpose to make themselves feel tough and to appeal to other hateful people. They punch down. That's who they are. But supposedly, that's not who we are. Since those of you who have grown comfortable throwing that word around seem to have forgotten, let me remind you, it's a slur. We're not supposed to say those. If your conversational vocabulary doesn't include slurs against people of color, or women, or LGBTQ people, and it probably doesn't unless you're a real piece of shit, then it shouldn't include a slur against people with intellectual disabilities either. We've already been through this. People with intellectual disabilities and their allies spent decades lobbying and raising awareness about how hurtful and dehumanizing that word is, and encouraging everyone to stop saying it. Those efforts paid off. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, the radical and revolutionary notion of viewing people with intellectual disabilities as human beings deserving of basic respect came to be normalized. In 2010, the United States Congress passed and President Obama signed what was known as Rosa's Law, which officially updated the language in federal law to use the terms intellectual disabilities and intellectually disabled in place of the various forms of the R word that were used before. The Senate committee that reviewed the legislation said in its report, referring to that outdated language, variations of these terms to describe individuals with intellectual disabilities are anachronistic, needlessly insensitive and stigmatizing, and clinically outdated. Rosa's Law passed the Senate unanimously. Rosa Marcelino, the girl with Down syndrome for whom the law was named, is from Maryland. And the bill was introduced by Barbara Mikulski, who was one of Maryland's U.S. senators at the time. As regular viewers of my channel know, I'm from Maryland. How you doing? And the fact that my state is home to Rosa and her family and is where Rosa's Law originated is something I, as a Marylander, am very proud of. It marks a genuine milestone of social progress, and it makes me want to bash my head against the wall when I see so many of you fucking it up. It's really aggravating when I see one of you who is to the left of me politically, casually using that word, because it's backwards. You're supposed to be policing my language. It's supposed to be you moralistically holding me to an unreasonably high standard, not me asking you to show a marginalized group a modicum of respect. Get with the program. When you all who use the R word are challenged on it, you fall back on a couple of predictable excuses. First, you say, I'm not using the word to attack intellectually disabled people. I'm using it to attack other people who deserve it for how they're acting. Fortunately, there are other words you can use to insult and attack someone who has it coming. Words that don't unnecessarily demean people in a marginalized group who have nothing to do with it. Because when you use a slur, that's what you're doing. Even if you're not directing the slur at someone from the group the slur is referring to. When you call someone who isn't intellectually disabled the R word, you're insulting them by comparing them to an intellectually disabled person. You're using the identity of the person with an intellectual disability as the basis for what is intended to be an unflattering comparison. You're assuming that a person with an intellectual disability is something no one would ever want to be or want to be likened to, and you're trying to hurt someone else's feelings by saying you are like one of those undesirable people. This isn't a very complicated idea. And I feel like a lot of you who continue to make this excuse are just not getting it on purpose. If I insulted someone else by comparing them to you, if my go-to reference whenever someone did something foolish or behaved like a jerk was you, you'd have a right to be upset about that, wouldn't you? I'm not saying you'd necessarily be upset about it. Maybe you're thick-skinned. Maybe you don't care that other people use you as an insult, but you'd have a right to be upset about it. You can see conceptually why it's a problem, right? You can also see why the I'm not directing it at one of them excuse is bullshit, I hope. I wasn't saying you were acting like you. I was insulting that person over there by saying that they were acting like you. What are you so offended about? It's ridiculous. And the fact that I'm expecting you to accept that reasoning adds to the original insult. The other excuse I see is we talk that way because people on the right talk that way, and we're meeting them on their own terms and talking to them in the language they understand. Oh, okay. So we're using all the other slurs too? People on the right throw around the N-word and the F slur for gay people pretty freely, so we here on the left side of the spectrum are going to do that too, in addition to the R word, so we can, what, match our enemies' knock for bigoted knock? Sounds like a winning strategy. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. This isn't me telling you when they go low, we go high. All due respect to Michelle Obama, that's not a winning strategy either. And I'm not just talking politics. On a personal level, there are occasions when you just need to hand somebody their ass, rhetorically speaking. Sometimes some folks just have it coming. If you're going to attempt such a verbal evisceration, you should be able to do it without the R word or any other slur. There are so many words available in our beautiful and preposterous English language that there is no excuse for people with intellectual disabilities or anyone else other than the target of your ire catching strays. You want to insult someone's intelligence? Fool, doofus, dipshit, shithead, shit for brains, shitwit, fuckhead, empty-headed fuck. Those are just off the top of my head. You want to make fun of someone for being easily fooled or believing in something that's obviously bullshit? Call them credulous or gullible or naive. If those sound too soft and intellectual-like, dip your pen in the blue ink and add some profanity. Credulous dipshit, gullible shithead, and so on. Mix it up. Freestyle. Here's one I like. Mark. I picked it up from pro wrestling lingo, but it originates with the carnival and it's also associated with con artists. The mark is the person being duped. The mark is the one whose money the carnies and the cons are after. You call someone a mark with enough disdain and condescension in your voice, and trust me, it'll get the point across. Oh, you really thought Trump was going to bring about world peace? Mark. Again, if it's too soft, intensify with expletives. You fucking mark. You dipshit Mark. You empty-headed fucking Mark. Or my recent favorite, with all appreciation to Randy Orton, Mark-ass stooge. That's poetry. You'd rather say the R word when you could be saying that? I'm not saying don't talk shit. Talk shit if shit needs talking. If someone is acting like an asshole, treat them like an asshole, but don't make yourself an asshole when you do it. My own record regarding this issue is far from spotless. I've used ableist language. Sometimes I still use it, though I used it much more frequently and more thoughtlessly in the past. I'm better about it now, and I'm always trying to be better still. Some of you might remember that quite a while ago, one of my regular series on this channel was called 5 Stupid Things. I did that series for years, and at one point it was one of my most popular series. But I had a friend who worked on me, gently, patiently, but persistently, and finally convinced me that stupid, which isn't as viscerally hateful as the R word, but still carries some of the same baggage, wasn't something I needed to say. So I changed the title of the series. I started using different adjectives for each video, chosen specifically for the subject of the video. And I made an effort to stop saying that word in my everyday speech. I admit, I still sometimes say it, thoughtlessly, but I'm better than I was. And I'm okay with being a work in progress as long as I'm able to recognize that progress still needs to be made, and I'm willing to put in effort toward it. I'll give you another example. I used to use the T slur that refers to trans people. I never used it as an insult. I never called a trans person that, either directly or indirectly. But I would use it ironically, or I would use it as an example, use it when assuming the voice of a transphobic person to illustrate their bigotry or to make fun of them or to make some other point. And because that's the way I used the word, and because I didn't use it that often even then, I didn't have a problem with it. Then I got a comment on a video where I said the T-slur from another friend, another patient friend, who was showing me more grace than I probably deserved. And my friend said, I understand why you're using that word, but I just wanted to point out that I've never heard you use another slur that way. You don't say the N-word or the F-slur or any other slur to make fun of bigots or to make a point. And that got through to me. And I stopped saying that word because I want trans people to know that I'm on their side. And it's hard to convince someone you're on their side when you're willing to casually disrespect them to make a point to someone else. There are other words I've removed from my vocabulary. The C word, and yes, the N word. I was born and raised in Western Maryland, one of the reddest parts of this blue state. And growing up, I heard that word said at one time or another by so many of the adults in my life that it was just normal. When I was a kid, I said it. When I was a young adult, I still sometimes said it in the same way I used to say the T-slur, sarcastically or to make a point against racism, I thought. Eventually, I realized that wasn't okay either. I don't say it anymore. I don't say the R word anymore either. And you know, I don't miss saying it. I don't wish I could still say it. Nobody forced me at gunpoint to stop saying it. Nobody's going to force you to stop saying it. I chose to stop saying it, just like I chose to stop saying those other hurtful, hateful words. It was a good choice. They were all good choices. Sometimes when people are asked to be more mindful of the words they use and to avoid terms like the R word, they complain about the language police, and they accuse the ones asking them to remove those words from their vocabulary of wanting to neuter everyone's speech. That's not what I'm advocating here. That's certainly not what I exemplify with my own speech. If you've watched my videos before, or even if you've only watched this one, let me ask you, do I seem like a poor communicator? Do I strike you as an inarticulate person? Not to toot my own horn, but I think I'm pretty good at getting my point across. And do I seem like someone who walks on eggshells when he talks? Someone who is constantly anxious about the words he chooses lest he offend someone? Someone who isn't free to express himself? Again, I can't be objective, so I might be wrong, but I don't think that's me. I say what I mean what I say, I don't mince words, I don't talk like a kindergartner or like a fucking youth pastor, and I do say things that offend or demean people sometimes, but they're the people I'm trying to offend or demean, the dirty little rat fucks who have it coming, not the innocent bystanders. And like I said, I'm not perfect. But I think at this point, my batting average is pretty goddamn high. If you use the R word, you have no excuse. There is no reason for it and no justification for it. Just because some dirtbag right-wingers are fine using language that degrades and dehumanizes marginalized people, that doesn't mean we should. We're supposed to be fighting for equality and human dignity for everybody. We need to do that without denying the dignity of people with intellectual disabilities for the sake of an insult or a joke. We can do that. It takes thoughtfulness, a bit of effort, maybe some creativity, but it's possible. If I can do it, you can do it too. In fact, some of you have probably done it before. This resurgence of R-word usage is, culturally speaking, an instance of backsliding. Like I said before, following decades of advocacy, we were at a place not so long ago where very few people were saying the R-word. Then came Trump and the rise of right-wing reactionaries that followed in his wake, and suddenly using dehumanizing language was treated like a birthright that was being reclaimed from the woke scolds who had so wrongfully oppressed free expression. And some of us got pulled into that slime pit. Because lest we forget, there are fools, doofuses, and dipshits on our side too. We have met the mark-ass stooges, and they are us. This is not a big ask. It's a modest plea to show people with intellectual disabilities the same basic respect any one of you demand for yourself. At a hearing before the passage of what became Rosa's Law, Nick Marcelino, the then 14-year-old brother of Rosa, who was 9 at the time, explained it in a way so simple and so profound that I have failed throughout the video to improve on or even match what he said. So I think I'll close this one out by quoting Nick. "Some say we shouldn't worry about the words, just the way we treat people. But if you think about it, what you call people is how you treat people. If we change the words, maybe it'll be the start of a new attitude towards people with intellectual disabilities. And they deserve it." Fucking right. That last part was me.